this is the beautiful part, I think, about Ryan. The movie is, when you see the movie, you say, wow, this movie is really big. It has a big set pieces. But it's at the same time, it's very intimate. It's very complex. So if you look at it in one way, you can say, oh, this is a small movie, because it really is an intimate movie.
There's no one, I think, that's more deserving of trust than Rian Johnson. If you look at his movies, each one is different from the last. You can't pigeonhole him and say, oh, that's the kind of film he makes. And I think that's what's going to happen with 8. It's so much different in many ways, subtle ways, than the other episodes, and yet I think it's very satisfying in delivering what the fans want to see as well.
He trusts the people that he works with, and that comes down to the people that this cast that he's inherited, but you still get the sense that he is giving you a lot of creative control. I just think he's like just a rare person in this, to be able to balance not broad storytelling, but storytelling that appeals and is digestible to a large audience, but at the same time not dumbed down for them. He doesn't make it easy for you.
He kind of reminds me of a West Coast jazz musician. He just kind of like lays back, giving a little direction here, and he's really, really laid back, but very sharp. He knows his scale. He knows what he's playing.
He's also the writer, so he also knows his story back and forth. So he's very easy to work with, to ask questions about the character and ask questions about the moment.
A good director is just like fundamentally the best thing in the world. So obviously having Rian Johnson coming in has its effect and has its influence, continuing the saga after JJ left a really good foundation. So it's nice to have, that amp up and that talent to help with the acting, for sure.
Ryan and Kathy Kennedy and Ram, as producers, really care deeply about how all their characters are represented, and in this case, how a woman is represented, and a woman in a place of power. And it was really important for Ryan that she have room to be very feminine and soft and ethereal and otherworldly, even spiritual, that she could hold all these different qualities, flirtatious, sensual, and powerful.
I loved Ryan's films. I thought they were so beautifully, brilliantly, intelligently executed with such depth, but exactly as you say, a real lightness of touch. And Ryan has such wonderful humor and puts you at real ease and invites collaboration. He wants to know what you think. He wants to know what you think about your story, what you think is happening, how you feel about the dialogue that's happening. And that's an incredible freedom to give an actor.
Han was, had a little bit of a scoundrel to him. Poe is much more of he's got kind of a reckless brashness, but it's like the can't be touched fighter pilot from the old war movies. It's that kind of gleam in the eye, almost idealistic hero brashness, I guess.
I think for Poe in this part of the story, I think it's him learning to not just be a soldier, but to be a leader. Not just be the heroic pilot, but perhaps even to learn to be a general. And that's a shift, because you're not just thinking about the mission. There's something about a pilot that says you never, once you engage, you don't retreat. You finish it. But that's great for the warrior, but that's not necessarily great for the whole army and for the whole cause.
The theme of mentors runs through this whole series, and to me, it made a lot of sense that Leia would be that to Poe. If Leia is the general in charge of the Resistance, her ace pilot is Poe. He and Leia kind of parallel and very, very different, but the same way that Luke and Rey play off each other, Leia and Poe play off each other during the course of the film.
Poe is her protege, and in a way, I think she thinks of him as Han, and which is the good news and the bad news. He's very dominating, and he doesn't listen to her, and she's trying to train him, and so we have some moments together.
I actually have had more to do with Carrie this time around, which has been really great because, you know, apart from her being incredibly funny and incredibly witty and just, she tells the most amazing stories, the scenes that I've been able to have with her, they're very heartfelt and they feel, there's a tenderness to them, even when she's slapping me over and over and over again.
One of the difficulties with writing 3PO as a character is because he's not a protagonist. He doesn't set things in motion. He tends to comment on it. But he therefore very much plays off the situation in which he's put. So that, for instance, in the old days when he was faced with Han Solo being an impossible man, that gave you a kind of dynamic. Being placed just with R2-D2 was this strange buddy dynamic. And now Rian Johnson has thought about it and thought, well, this character has these qualities of truth, of honesty, of loyalty, of remembrance of his friends and his belief in authority. And let's mess with that.
Person that he's never met, maybe he's heard of on another ship, Admiral Holdo, played by the amazing Laura Dern, shows up, and she's not what he expected a general to look like, to behave, and right away they're at odds.
He's amazing and hilarious, and we've had a lot of fun playing with what our dynamic is and somebody who shows up and puts him in his place. And ultimately, in a very flirtatious way, is giving him a very potentially valuable lesson.
Because the tone is a funny one. It has humor, it has some flirtation, but it also has some real conflict in it. And these are people that are butting heads. So I think his philosophy of war, of being a warrior, of being a hero is kind of being taken for a loop, especially with the character of Holdo.
He's definitely more aware about his part in this story. He's more affected by the events that happened before and brings that same energy and struggle into episode 8. But at the same time, he still is kind of confused as to where he belongs exactly. So although he's now matured, he's more of a fighter, there's still some loose ends in terms of his character development.
DJ is he's a cynic, and he believes that that good guys and bad guys are just they're just basically the same, and he's a profiteer. He profits from the eternal war of good and evil. He's an opportunist, but he can get you out of a jam. And he can get you in a jam. So you know, we play that line of like, is he good or bad? We don't know, but he's a mercenary, really. His mantra is live free and don't join. You know, so that's basically his attitude, and he tries to he shows Finn that even the good guys are dirty at times, or are dealing with, or are perhaps corrupt as well.
DJ has interesting views and in Finn's journey to making a decision on what side he's on. DJ suggests that there is no side, that, you know, it's part of the same system. The Resistance, you know, takes out the First Order fleet, and then another day the First Order takes out a Resistance fleet. It's just the way it goes. It depends on who's paying. So why get involved in that fight? And that's something that Finn definitely considers, like seriously considers, that maybe I don't need to choose a side, maybe I just need to get Rey and we can go off to the Outer Rim and live our lives there. But it's more complicated than that.
she's kind of enamored by Finn, because Finn at this point after Force Awakens is a huge deal. He and Rey are basically the new like Luke and Han, like they're big deals now. And Rose, like I said, is nobody.
Rey is, at the end of 7, she's kind of been thrown into this big adventure. She's been sent on this mission to find Luke. She has this kind of, desire for connection to her past and some notion that there are answers there that she can get. I think she probably expects there are some answers about who she, and that's really what she is on a quest to kind of find out, who she is and how she fits into this story. And who she is, not just meaning like who are her parents, where does she come from, but meaning like really what is she going to be going forward? What's her place in all of this? And I think she's expecting, when she shows up on that island, there's part of her and there's a big part of us that expects that she's going to get that from Luke.
So Ryan, in The Last Jedi, for Rey at least, has made it more of a kind of emotional exploration. She spends a lot of time on the island with Luke, and I think she finally has time to take stock of everything that's happened and starts to ask herself the questions of what is actually going on and why is she there and what does she want, because so far it's mainly been what other people want, and she's kind of just had to do the right thing, which was do the thing and take the lightsaber to Luke and everything. So I think The Last Jedi is more of a kind of emotional journey.
I think, it's one of those things where because of the gravity of the situation, the urgency of the situation, she doesn't have the luxury of getting to know him and sort of hang out and relax and exchange ideas. She needs him, and she wants to enlist his help and his abilities towards her cause. And that's the conflict, because Luke's in a much different place than we've ever seen him in before.
I think Rey's expectations at the end of The Force Awakens are much like the whole audience is. She's expecting after this whole journey, and she walks up 300 steps, that she hands him the lightsaber and he turns around and is like, yeah, sure, I'll come back, I'll save the galaxy and everything. And as we see almost immediately, that's not quite how it's going to happen. So I think there's just lots of layers in their relationship, in the relationship of him in the whole thing, in the relationship of her in the whole thing, and it's kind of it's a big journey for both of them.
Kylo was that was the character that I was most excited about getting into and writing, and coming out of The Force Awakens, seeing that character, and because in the first Star Wars films, Vader was a great villain, but he was never someone that you identified with. You only identified with Luke's relationship to him. So Vader was, he was the monster. And then he was the scary father, and then he was the father you had to reconcile with. He was kind of an outside force. Whereas, especially in the context of these stories being about the transition from adolescence into adulthood. So you're identifying with Luke. He's the one going through that transition, and Vader is something he essentially has to navigate to get there. It's almost like Rey and Kylo are two halves of the protagonist. Rey the dark and Rey the light and Kylo the dark. And Kylo, again, this is all about the transition from adolescence into adulthood. Kylo is that anger of adolescence and wanting to reject your parents and wanting to break away.
Kylo Ren is actually younger than I am in life, so it's the first person that I've actually played that's younger than I am, which was something that I remember Kathy reminding me of while we were shooting the first one, and something that was in Ryan's writing innately, of someone who's almost not becoming a man necessarily, but becoming more kind of entrenched in his ideas, however seemingly ignorant they are on the outside, but or not ignorant, completely, justified by almost to a religious fervor that he's doing the right thing. Something about the youthfulness of him was not lost in Ryan's writing.
I remember working with Adam so clearly. The first day I worked with him, we did the torture scene. And he was and it's hilarious because obviously their relationship is the most contentious, is that the word? But he was the most kind, generous person to work with. He said thank you at the end of the day, and there was a moment where I was kind of like struggling to get the emotion, and he gave me so much time. I didn't ask him, he just saw it. He is wonderful. So the fact that I got to work with him more this time was really, really great.
How epic this kind of Greek drama that's going on around them. At the center of it is these two people who are on opposite sides, but divided by something that's very thin. The dark and light that, as I was saying, that exists in both of us is. They're not far off from each other, and in a way that they're together in this journey where they are in life, where maybe that they both feel alone, like they're almost each other's opposites in a great way.
For me, it's family. It's about family, and that's what's so powerful about it. I mean, I go to Comic-Con and stuff like that, and I meet a lot of these people, and it's very powerful for them. They're showing the films to their children and their grandchildren, and they're sharing something that moved them as a child. And so that's really personal. And I've watched a lot of that over the years, and them coming in with babies that have the little Princess Leia outfit on that I always say looks like, they swallowed the little outfit so the baby wouldn't come out nude. And would come out right away into a Star Wars universe. But that's the thing that I think makes it so powerful for a lot of people, is it's just an identifying universe, and it's something that creates a community. So anything that does that does heal people, when you can have that thing in common. And then you can find others. So in a way, I don't know if it saves lives, it probably does, but I know that it improves them.